Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us all today. I am Priyanka and I will be the moderator today. Some quick housekeeping things before I hand over to our panelists. We will not have the chat open during the webinar. You can send your questions in via the Q&A feature, and I will be posing them to the panelists at the end of their conversation, which will approximately be in an hour's time from now. If we do drop out, please try and sign back on, and we will be trying that as well. If that is not possible, we will reschedule the webinar, but let's hope the planets are aligned for us today. Now, I'll be welcoming our panelists. Our panelists today are Leo Sprexel, Padma Menon, and Sean Pereira. You already have their bios, so I will be brief in my introductions. Padma Menon is a dancer and philosopher who is a pioneer in reviving the ancient practice of dance as a goddess wisdom tradition. She has been teaching for nearly 4 decades and currently runs Moving Archetypes, through which she works with women from all over the world via online programs. Please join me in welcoming Padma. Not yet, there's Padma.
Thank you. Thanks, Priyanka.
I will now welcome our second panelist, Leo Sprexel, who is an eminent coach and mentor from the Netherlands. He's the former artistic director of Corso Theatre, which under his leadership became a center for dance in the world. Leo continues to mentor and work with dancers. Please join me in welcoming Leo.
Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Good morning in the Netherlands.
Good evening to you all.
Thanks for joining us, Leo. And our last and final panelist is Sean Pereira. Sean holds a PhD in science communication from the ANU and researches how people communicate across cultural barriers. He has an abiding interest in Indian philosophy and traditions. I will now hand over to Padma to start the conversation.
Welcome, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you, Priyanka. And I want to also welcome Priyanka. Priyanka is in my classes, but she's a woman. She's a very accomplished woman in her own right. She has her own consultancy, and she's now the Global Policy Director for the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation, Research Foundation as well. So thank you, Priyanka. And once again, welcome everyone, those who are joining us live today, or if you are watching this recording. I'm so honored and delighted that you will join us for this discussion today. Before we start, I just want to start in an embodied way because, you know, we are here speaking about embodied traditions. And so, you know, let's start with something embodied. And I'm going to get up, and perhaps if you can get up, or you can try this on your as you're seated. But we're going to move into this movement of Shiva. We are talking about Shiva's dance. So just join me in this little movement. I'm not going to make you do a complicated dance. It's just moving into that position of Shiva. So we start with dropping into our lower body, keeping our the femoral joint open, and just drop your weight down into the lower body. And then with your right hand, this is the hand which is saying it's beyond the lens of fear. It's not fearlessness, beyond the lens of fear, beyond the lens of fear, that openness beyond the lens of fear. And your left arm, it's like water flowing down that arm, and that arm, the energy flows right down to the center of the earth. And now, if you can do this safely, you transfer your weight onto your right leg and you lift the left leg. Of course, it's unstable. Yeah, of course, it's unstable. But let me I'm going to invite you to do it one more time. So, and be with the sensation. Don't worry about where is the position of the arm. Drop down into the sensation. So here we are. breathe and just feel that. And you can come out of it. Thank you for joining me for that. And that is a philosophy of Shiva. The philosophy of Shiva there as a movement. You know, the philosophy that reality is unstable. When you stand on one leg, it's not random that Shiva does that, but it's because of the essence of reality being unstable. So anyway, you can write a whole library about that particular constellation, but I just wanted you to taste the nature of this dance. So I just wanted to also, before we open it up, to acknowledge my connection with both Leo and Sean. I have known Leo for more than 20 years, and we have worked together very closely. We've collaborated together in the Netherlands, and more recently, we've been collaborating on an embodied inquiry. How is dance? How is Indian dance the connection to nature? Is it a connection to nature? What is the philosophy that is revealed through the dance? And we've had about over 300 hours of these embodied work we've been doing. So me in my studio in Australia and Leo there from the Netherlands. And I hope we'll have time to share a couple of minutes. I won't be sharing 300 hours, but a couple of minutes from that. In case you're all scared and ready to leave, we hope we can share a couple of minutes. And Sean is someone that has always been there to be a sounding board, a reflective person, particularly at the level of paradigms. I find that Sean has got this gift of really looking at the paradigmatic, way in which we sort of think about reality, interpret reality, relate to reality. And I find his reflections really helpful as well. So they're both very special people for me, and I'm deeply honored that they are here to share this session. What is this webinar about? Why are we having it? A couple of things which I don't think are very contentious. One is that we live in times where we are disconnected from our body. I think there's enough people now talking about it, even in the mainstream. Doctors have been speaking about it, the more holistic doctors. Economists are speaking about it. Some philosophers are speaking about it. So there seems this idea that the truth actually, that we are living in this mind-dominated reality, which is very mechanistic, and our lives have become very robotic. I think that's pretty uncontentious. Then the second thing is that we are disconnected from Earth, from nature, which is also very much accepted now. And of course, there's a connection between the one and the two. It is the mind-dominated way of living that makes us disconnected to Earth. But there is this big thing in the middle that no one speaks about quite a lot, and that is the body. So if we're not going to live a mind-led life, well, what's going to lead us then? It's the body. But there doesn't seem to be enough of that returning to the site of reality, to the body. That kind of return hasn't happened enough. What does the body-led living look like? And then there is even less focus on dance as the language of the body. Does dance actually help us not just return to the body, but in that same return, reconnect to nature, to have a completely different experience of reality? And this is not a new proposition. Many ancient traditions had exactly this purpose for dance, including ancient dance in Indian tradition. So this is what we're hoping to explore today. When we speak of Shiva's dance, we're not just speaking about dance as a technique or something that we've picked up out of a text, but it's the cosmos of dance. Dance as philosophy, dance as ritual, dance as consciousness, and dance as movement. So this is what we hope. It's a very big task, but at least we begin our exploration today. So I think I've spoken enough, and I'll hand over to Sean. Over to you, Sean.
Thank you, Padma, and good evening, everyone. And it's such a pleasure and a privilege to be here today. Padma, you speak about dance, and more importantly, the connection to nature you mentioned. And I was listening to a podcast that you were on, which you were interviewed, the Women Awakened. And you made a very important statement there, which really resonated with me, that our body is our first earth, you said. And I mean, it does make sense because many traditions speak of the body returning to earth at the end of life. But we never speak of the body as emerging from the earth. And that is something that made me quite curious. But I want to explore it a bit further with something Leo had mentioned before. Leo speaks about dance as something being once performed, it's no more, it's done and gone. And that is a bit of a contention for me, at least, because when I think about the body as being with the earth or emerging from the earth and then gone, sort of the dance having gone. So does this mean that, does it enforce the fact that dance showcases that everything is temporary? That it, Leo, do you have any observations on this?
Yeah, I think dance as an art form, we don't realize that enough as something special. If you would like compare it to the other art forms, dance is the art form of the moment. You know, it's the art form of, in a certain way, it has a very special connection with time, because everybody who has been there with watching dance, and you know that once it's finished, it's gone. There's no dance is not an object. It has no object. It's not something that you can hold. It's not something that you can put on the wall or that you can read. It's exactly connected to the moment, and that is because dance is about the body. And in like I also said in the talk we had before, a special moment is always when dancers and choreographers enter into the studio, and in fact they are entering a zero situation, because there's at that moment there's nothing. And then when of course the whole creative process starts, in fact then the body is entering the unknown territory, as I would call it. You know, the start is zero, and we are entering together in a situation that we don't know. We don't know what is going to be there. We don't know what's going to happen. So there's a strong connection from the body to the unknown. If you would like compare that to the mind-dominated world, the mind always says we know what is happening, we know what is there, and if we don't know it, we are going to know it. But the world of the body, in fact, says no, we are entering the unknown, and it will be embodied experiences that we will encounter. And that is exactly the kind of wisdom that dance and through the vessel of the body has to offer.
That's very thought-provoking, because I mean, we speak about the body as a vessel also here. And you mentioned this term zero, which I thought is quite interesting, because it's a word that has got a lot of parlance in today's discourse with climate change and many other requirements to reduce coal, fossil fuel, and so forth. So beyond zero or zero emissions. And what you speak of is an interesting paradigm, because you start with zero, as you say, and in a certain sense you end on zero, which brings me to another point that Padma has often mentioned in her classes, and I think this is a quote that Padma shares from J. Krishnamurti, that coming empty of the known in a zero space. This is something I have found very difficult to grasp. And the best metaphor that she provides, or you have provided, Padma, is leave your mind with your slippers at the door. And that's something that I found very difficult to do. We don't even, So I'm quite interested with this idea of zero, and the whole idea of zero emerging in the ancient Indian context as a special number, or non-number, one could even say. So, I mean, Padma, do you mind sort of explaining a bit more about this whole concept, because it's a little difficult to understand when it comes to dance today, because people don't come with a zero. It's a choreographed movement. It's predetermined. It's mind dictated. And so the languaging that we use for dance is completely different to the embodied practice that you are talking about. Am I correct in that understanding?
So Sean, yes, the zero, yeah, and like you say, it's really interesting because it's almost like there are levels of zero, right? So when you come into somewhere, and sometimes even in the situation that Leo's talking about, so you come into the studio, and often if you're working in a professional setup, a dancer has they have a language in their body. They have a certain vocabulary language in their body. The choreographer may have very particular styles or they're coming from a particular style. So it's, there is a certain body that they're going to draw on in order to, it's still a zero when compared, say, to a play, which you have a script or something to start with. I mean, dance is, in that sense, it's the closest you get in a mind-dominated world. It's the closest you get to the unknown. And that's its power. And also that's its fear. That's why people have marginalized dance to the extent that they have. I mean, it's interesting that in the recent measures, you could even go to the pub and drink, but you couldn't dance, So dance was considered the most dangerous activity, which is, I think it says something about our archetypal sort of fear of the body and dance. Now, in Indian dance, it's called Yagna. And Yagna is, this is the thing that Krishnamurti says, when he says you come without anything known. So as a dancer, it's quite hard for me because I have to also go to that space and not come with, like everything I know. I already know all these things. And I have to endeavor to come into that space of not bringing everything I know into that moment. And that includes the stories about who I am. Actually, the story of who I am includes everything. The whole story of the universe is in the story of who I am. I'm my family, my community, my culture, it's my world, it's my universe. So you come out of that story, and that there is a whole process. And this is this coming into this ritual body, the ritual body, the ritual consciousness. Now, in these practices, I feel that when I look at other dance traditions, which are practices of consciousness, they are all ritual traditions, and ritual isn't just saying, I'm doing these things. It is about a transformation. There is a transformation in the consciousness. There is a transformation in your state of being that makes it ritual. It's not just about doing certain things, but what that doing is doing to your state of being. So that ritual body is what helps you to come into that state of, that moving into that state of dropping what you know. And this is an ongoing process. It's not like you reach that stage because, of course, like Leo said, everything is in the moment. So this moment, next moment, it's like every moment you've got to come into it. You've got to birth it. Not that I come into it 5 minutes and then, that's it. I sign up somewhere and that's it. So that is this dance, which is like this movement that happens and it's gone. It's just beautiful. And I think maybe that's why people are afraid of dance, because you can't grab it and acquire it in that sense. And especially in these traditions where you don't even have that mastery acquisition purpose of dance, you're just doing it in the moment.
I found a very important, one word that you mentioned there, birthing. Again, a body-related function, a very female-dominated area, one could say, is this part of the marginalization or separation of dance from mainstream? The post-16th century, the post-Protestant movement, the post-Enlightenment need for controlling nature, and nature oftentimes personified as in the feminine. So the control of nature and the fact that this body is beyond our control, as we have seen, I mean, even in the pandemic, that's one lesson that has emerged. So do you think marginalization of dance comes from this space of control or the inability to control the body, and therefore dance does not receive the limelight as some of the other arts, for example, would have? Perhaps from your experiences in the Netherlands.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting if you look at the history of dance. Dance has been always intriguing a lot of philosophers, you know, and exactly the fact that there is a bit of an enigma, the body, that in the dancing body. That is exactly why philosophers were intrigued, because it's exactly, let's say, the mind that looks at the dancing body and wants to kind of conceptualize it. It wants to know what that exactly is. And so there is a tendency to you know, from the mind to embrace the body and say, what is it? Can we rationalize this? What exactly is the dancing body? So there's a lot of whole philosophical tradition that wants to engage with the body, and in fact, what it wants is to verbalize or to put into words what the dancing body in fact is. So there is this, of course, this the rationalization of the dancing body and putting it into words and explaining what it was. There's a lot of performances that, you know, that when entering the exit of the performance is gone, and you listen to what people are talking about, their experiences, what they've seen, and most people say, oh yeah, the dancers were wonderful. And that exactly gives the kind of insecurity about, like, how do we in fact verbalize what we have seen? How do we verbalize the experience that we had watching the dancer and watching the dance? That is a very difficult thing, because exactly it has the dance is a lot about the intuition, about the embodied experience, even by the audience watching. You know, audience watching even said that, you know, watching dance is a very healthy experience, because and it's healthy for the body, even though it's passive. That's so intriguing, because there is a communication between the body watching and the body moving, and that already explains so much about why these embodied sensations are so relevant in our time now, and also the way you know, our embodied intuition works. That is what happens a lot in the dance, and happens a lot in our own experience of our own body, especially in this time where it's so relevant. I mean, Padma and I was speaking in our sessions a lot about dance, and we said, in fact, the dance will become the lens to watch reality, to look at reality. And that is exactly because, I mean, especially in this time, there's so many, what is reality really, you know? What is it? I mean, the reality of a man, woman in Ukraine whose houses are being bombed, or the reality of someone in Russia who is being manipulated by the news in the official Russian media. What is exact the reality? The reality is manipulated by language, and the body is in that sense a very important security to go back to, because the body can't lie, your own body can't lie.
It's about, you know, it's the outsourcing of truth. This has happened centuries ago, because where it was in embodied traditions, in the more ancient embodied traditions, realities, the site of reality was the body. Everything, the body actually in Indian dance, we use the philosophy is called rasa, which says taste. So, and the body is like a pot, and the ancient goddess was a pot. The body is like this cooking pot where everything from reality is cooked here. So it's, reality isn't a remote experience just because we know something about a galaxy, I don't know, billions of light years away. It's about that reality in our body, not as information. I think what has happened is we think information is reality, and this is not a new movement. I mean, it has intensified now, but it started when we moved from the embodied tradition to the textual traditions. This happened centuries ago, and it happened all over the world because consciousness is a unified movement. So I think at a certain point, and it's not only me, there are other people who've said, written about this, that movement of consciousness from a more body-centered experience of reality to word and text, and so even truth became a statement. And so and then it became a statement that only certain people were authorized to say, and we are just passively receiving it if we are lucky enough to receive it, this whatever the truth is. But we forgot that actually it's our birthright, this embodied inquiry, because we live and die in the body, and it is our birthright that we experience the truth, and it is there in our body, just waiting for us to actually turn to it and to be able to return to lead with the body. So not leading, sometimes nowadays when we say embodied, we are actually doing things with the body that is still dictated by the mind. And, sure enough, those things are useful. I'm not, this doesn't mean to say that everything else should stop, but we really need to sort of look into how does the body lead our relationship with reality, because the body is nature. And in ancient India, it was said that the mountain body, the goddess's breasts are the mountain, her hips are the great ocean, and so it was like laying the landscape on the body. And maybe here, because when we were working together with Leo, one of the sessions we did was the body as a landscape. And so Leo just gave me this, he just said, body as landscape, start moving. And so I'm hoping I can, technically, if everything works, I'll just share that session, but just let me, 2 minutes of that, but let me just say what's happening in that. So when you watch it, you can see. And this little bit here is as I was doing, so I don't plan, I just start moving. And as I was doing, a particular movement constellation just appeared in the body. And it was this movement constellation, which is called the descent of Ganga, or the river Ganga from the heavens. And in the way the movement goes, it's like the feet come over the body, and it's like the body just moves like a wheel. Of course, you literally don't do it, but that is the suggestion of the movement. And so suddenly that movement came, and then it was allowing the movement to open up its cosmos, its whole philosophy, because each of these movement constellations is a philosophical text. And so it was allowing it to open up the philosophy. So let me just share that with you, just a couple of minutes, because, it's always hard to talk about dance.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that this session Body as Landscape back after I think it's something of a few weeks ago, right, Padma?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just turned it off. Yes. Yeah. It's yeah. I mean, it's yeah. So this is the unpacking. It's like the back end of a movement constellation, you know. So it's the retreating. So you go from a particular movement and go into the cave of that movement, which is all these traditions had these caves, you know, moving back into the cave, retreating into the cave of the body, retreating into the cave of the movement. So the word, the form, the story is the doorway. And then the more you can let go, you can retreat into the cosmos of that movement. And when I do these sessions, it helps me to then kind of feel what is the philosophy of each movement. So that then when I'm teaching, I can feel that, you know, each movement is a philosophy. Dance doesn't illustrate philosophy. It is the source of philosophy. It is philosophy. And it's a very different kind of philosophy to the texts. And I feel like we've had centuries of going on the way we are going. So isn't it time now to give something else, which is not so new, it's actually very old, but I just feel like, you know, we have to really now start looking at something that is radically different, not marginally different, and not like tinkering around the edges, but something that's going to say, you know what, let's start from somewhere else now.
Yeah, and I also want to stress that, I mean, in our sessions, we have felt that kind of urgency to like find where the opposition mind body lies, and you could say that, you know, like in this period of mind domination, it distances from nature, you know, because the mind says we know what the nature is and we can dominate it. We can dominate nature. We can nature is an object and we can exploit it. All the mechanism that has been going on for such a long time, and in the urgency of returning to the body is also the urgency of realizing that as humankind we are nature. We are part of nature, you know, and even nature was there before we were there, and nature would also be there if we wouldn't be there anymore. So as humankind we are nature, and that you know, the body as landscape is in fact the intuition that, you know, our body is, nature is in our body. We are nature, you know. We are being, we come to life, we are being born, we navigate through our life, and at the end we die and we go again. That is nature. This enigmas of life, birth, death, is the essence of what nature is, in fact, and what we are part of. So it is so important, especially in this time after, you know, being in pandemic period, that kind of taught us to be afraid of our own body, to see our body as a threat. And that is exactly what's, you know, but the message is not that we should be afraid of our body, but that we should look at our body as part of nature and treat it in that way.
Do you think the mind-dominated movement over such a long period of time that we've been exposed to in terms of understanding the world has made us afraid of our own bodies, has not only distanced us from nature, which we know, as we have all discussed, and is obvious, and as Leo said, this mechanism of controlling nature. So as much as we have become afraid of nature and gone through the huge effort to control it, and in that whole process, our bodies, which are part of nature, have now become something that we have become fearful of because we are unable to control it. So, I mean, a radical movement, as you say, Padma, to come to it from a completely different stance. How will we talk about it? I mean, I don't think talking is the correct term, because it will do a disservice because it's a mind space again. But how do we embark on something like this?
You know, Sean, that's such an important question.
Yeah.
And because, you know, there's no point in saying we have to, we should, and we must. That's still the mind's language of brutality. And in fact, when Leo and I were working together, I think Leo used the word, this inherent friction. You know, there is an inherent friction between the mental consciousness and this embodied consciousness, which is the earth consciousness or nature consciousness. You know, the body is earth, so that's a different consciousness. And there is an inherent friction. And this, in ancient India, this is the relationship between the goddess and her consort, whether it's Skanda, the earlier deity, or as Shiva later, or Rudra. And they have this, so this movement of Shiva turning, or Rudra, you know, moving away, losing, and then yearning. So we hold this yearning. I mean, as humanity, at the core of us, we have this yearning. And we think the yearning is about the next job, the next holiday, you know, the next whatever it is. And no matter what we do, this is why capitalism flourishes, right? Because this is an insatiable yearning. And more things are offered, and we keep on, and we keep the so-called economy going because of this unfulfilled yearning we hold. And so this is ancient, this yearning. This is the yearning that Shiva had and Rudra had. And so when Rudra went across the landscape, he was howling. He was howling in loneliness. He was howling in this yearning. And then when he turns to the goddess, when he returns to the goddess and makes love to her, there is this beautiful movement. So this flow, in fact, Shiva's dance is the dance of the mind that can be brought back to the goddess. That is kind of, you know, remembers and comes back, remembers that beauty. We can't brutalize the mind. You know, there's no, you can't, because the mind is the master of brutality. Going to the mind and saying, you have to do this and you have to do that, it's not going to work. But what the mind likes is pleasure. And again, in this ancient tradition, it says karma, or pleasure, is the strongest energy. It is stronger than everything else in the world. And that's why at the core of all these traditions was artistic practices. You know, whether you look at indigenous traditions in Australia, this dance tradition, or any of the other, the artistic practice, because it's about pleasure, it's about beauty. And when you have these artistic practices, are not just any artistic practice, they are very sophisticated, dare I use the word, technologies. They're very sophisticated technologies of how you turn the mind towards that embodied consciousness. And you don't lose your mind. It's just that the mind finds its place, its rightful place. And so this friction, this is where dance is so important, because we have to recognize there is an inherent friction. And, you know, initially I was thinking about, you know, the missing link. It's the missing link, because there's no point in telling people turn towards nature. As long as we're going from our mind-dominated thing, the nature is always going to be an object. That turning has to be Shiva's turning, and it has to be a dance turning. And you know, when I say this, I feel like it's like almost a ridiculous thing to say in the reality we are in. What? Dance? So serious. But dance can change us. Dance can change humanity. And it did at one time. You know, these practices were very powerful practices.
The fact that you speak of karma and Shiva on the eve of Holi, I find quite timely. And Shiva's third eye, destroying karma, and him only emerging bodiless, hence Ananga. Is there some symbolism there, Padma?
Yes, absolutely. So what did Shiva do? Karma as the object. He looked upon it. There was this objectified karma. But what happened? And remember, it's the goddess who goes to him and says, you know, please. So the goddess knows. She is the mistress of karma. You know, karma doesn't affect her. So she knows. And she said to Shiva, please don't, you know, you, for those who are listening, let me just quickly, I won't tell the whole story, but there is a story that as Shiva was sitting in meditation, you know, the goddess was trying to get his attention. And because he wasn't attending, the god of love, Kama, comes and shoots an arrow. And then Shiva, you know, feels desire. And then he gets very angry and he opens his third eye and turns this god of love, karma, to ashes. Of course, this is a later story. The goddess doesn't have to do much. You know, in earlier stories, Shiva remembers and turns to the goddess. But anyway, but the interesting thing, even in this story, it's like the archetypal wisdom somehow permeates, you know, even when we go from this more goddess led to, to the more kind of masculine traditions, because in turning the god of love into ashes, he actually became all pervasive because he was, disembodied. He was everywhere. So he's so subtle now that you can't see him. He's everywhere. They say he's in your eyes, he's in your nose, in all your sense organs. They are seats of karma, of pleasure.
I have not been to the CERN nuclear reactor. I don't know whether you have been, Leo, and assuming given that you're in Europe, and there's a huge Nataraj statue outside the nuclear reactor in building, and there quantum physicists make claims about the links between the imagery and the science. And you were speaking before about vibration moving back and forth, Padma, and essentially all matter is vibration, is movement, it's energy, it's vibrating at different frequencies essentially. And sometimes even in science, we use the word dancing. We speak about parts of the atom, electrons dancing. We speak of the dance of. So in that respect, I mean, are we all speaking about the same thing? But is language actually hiding the bigger message? I don't know.
What do you say, Leo?
Well, it was interesting. There's a film director that I know that at a certain point he wanted to make a film in the CERN reactor in Swiss, and of course, I mean, almost nobody is allowed to be there, but he got permission, so he made a very interesting film with dancers into the reactor tunnel in CERN. I think, yeah, in a certain way, fundamentally, also he realized, and there's another film. I just recently read an interview with a film director who was making wonderful documentaries about refugees in Europe and their journeys that they're taking. And he said, in the films that I have done, I came to realize, because there's a fragment in the film where the refugees start dancing, and he said, from that moment on, I decided that I will never in my life make a film anymore without dancing in it. And because he said the dance that was there in the films, that is so much about connection and about, bodies coming together, a kind of unity. So I'm completely convinced that exactly that. So, taking a distance from language, but letting the body speak will reveal a completely different truth that we don't recognize, in our, let's say, digital reality or the way we construct verbally reality. The body speaks a different truth. That is my feeling, and that is what also I think when he said there will be, I will never make a film anymore without dancing in it. That is also that kind of recognition. Now, I don't know whether this is an answer to your questions, Sean.
No, it does, because I mean, if there's one other point, I mean, it links to what Padma has spoken about temple dancing. And Padma shared an article with me recently about the whole stigma and the criminalization of Devdasis in India. But essentially, temple dancing, from what I have heard from you and what I have read, essentially speaks of a space where dancing happened, but it was not meant to convey a story, essentially. It was meant to invoke that rasa, as you spoke about before. Again, another concept that is quite difficult to grasp, and I think maybe words don't do it justice, because it's a feeling space. It's again one of those embodied intelligences that we have to appreciate rather than try to analyze, which the mind does. The mind is a tool of analysis. So maybe if we have dancing to communicate, it might convey a message that is much more holistic, less compartmentalized. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely, Sean, because, you know, when the whole movement of mental consciousness was a movement of separation. And so archetypally, in different cultures, we speak about this in different ways, but it always says manifestation, the mind, was always a movement of separation from the one. And that's not to say that it is a wrong thing. So, you know, when we say, let's have a body-led intelligence, or let's have what is the truth of the body, that doesn't mean to say that the mind has no place. The mind has a rightful place then, because right now what we're doing is the mind is trying to conquer everything which is even beyond its capacity, you know, and we think reality is the small kind of way in which the mind is, you know, the little domain of the mind is all of reality. And so this, you know, this movement towards wholeness, it cannot come from the mind, because the mind's very nature is to divide and fragment, and which is necessary for us. Functionally, we need, you know, to categorize things or to detail things and fragment things. But the mind is incapable of unity, because language itself is about dividing. You know, you have one word, it means something because it's not something else. And whereas the body, this is the cooking pot. It's such a brilliant practice, you know, this thing of the cooking pot, where you put all the spices in and then it cooks it to its essence. You know, when you cook a dish in India, you don't want to taste the individual spices, because then, you know, you haven't cooked properly. So it's about that everything going in, and the essence is rasa. And at a sensation level, every sensation is connected to every other sensation. You know, we start with fear, but when you drop down to fear as a sensation, an archetypal sensation, it is connected to being fearsome, it's connected to ferocity, it is connected, but this will not come with, the mind cannot get around it, because it's not logical in the mental sense. And it's very logical in an embodied sense. You know, this joining the dots, I think one of the women in my individual program beautifully called it joining the dots. You know, she said, you start with one sensation and suddenly, you know, these unexpected dots are being joined. And so there is no good and bad sensation. And so this unifying experience is a sensation. It's not a thought. It cannot be a thought. If I just say, I want to be one with nature, that's a thought. And in that thought is already the division, I and nature. I want to be one with nature. You know, it's already the duality there. But when you say body is landscape and you move into the movement, it's a sensation. And that absolutely, you can sense how the tree is in you and you are in the tree. You know, how the bird song is in you and you are in the bird song. And this is not just a fantasy, you can actually sense it. And it's such an intimate connection.
and it dispels that mind generated fear, because that is a, I mean, as if there is a divider, if there is a read, if the mind uses a tool for division to separate and understand, I think it comes from a very primordial space in the mind of fear. It's driven by fear. So that which you know and that which you don't know. And what you don't know is often fearful. And so if that is broken, what you just said now, Padma, speaks about breaking that barrier of fear that comes down.
Yeah.
Because we are not frightened of it anymore, because it's us, it's one. We are not afraid of ourselves.
Yeah.
And if our body is part of that bigger universe, the bigger nature, the whole picture that we need to identify with. But it's a radical message, isn't it?
Well, why do you think every deity has the abhaya? You know, it's not say don't be fearless, because that's a duality. It's saying not the lens of fear. But in this goddess tradition, fear is very much there. The dance, the tradition knows that we are going to be afraid. And so there are all these doorway deities who are going to accompany us, like Shiva, like Skanda, like, Ashwins. They are these deities who accompany us. They recognize the fear, and they are the deities who are like, come on to our chariot and we are going to accompany you. And, all this happens as ritual movement, but it's very much recognized. So again, in the goddess, there is no duality, or in this, embodied dance, there's no duality. Because even in the Natya Shastra, it says everything in reality is there in the dance. So it's not about dividing good and bad. Everything as it is in reality is there in the dance. Because the dance is it's like the primordial soup from where the mind plucks out, and divides and tries to sort of create its version of reality. What do you say, Leo?
Well, yeah, of course, when I think about, the times that we were speaking about the dance, being performed in the cave, and when you think about that, historical about that times, of course, nature was the sensation of something unknown. So all the manifestations of nature was in that time a domain of something miraculous, something unknown. All the cruelty of nature was something unknown. And now we live in the illusion that man is sitting on the top, and in fact is the dominating factor of nature, which is completely an illusion. It's not so. We are not dominating nature. That is what constant manifestation of what's happening around us with the climate problems, but also with the COVID pandemic. All the manifestations makes us clear, no, nature can't be dominated. Nature is, the way to survive is when nature comes in, when we see ourselves as part of nature, when nature comes again in our body. And that is exactly also again to realize that the importance of that we don't know. We don't know. We think we know, but we don't. And dance and moving is the adventure of again realizing that what we don't know is an adventure for humankind. It's come back to that realization.
I think we've done one. We started with nature and we explored it through Shiva's dance, and we've come back to nature. Not a linear model, cyclic, and as Leo often says it's in the present, it's in the now. So there is no beginning or end. And but I guess we are caught in a mind paradigm with time running on our screens. And I think we have come one full circle back to the hour at 9 o'clock, which I think at least in Canberra, but it must be in the morning there for you, Leo. So
yeah, it's 11.
So maybe Priyanka, can we give over to you if there are any questions?
Yes, thanks everyone. That was a fascinating discussion, and like Sean said, full circle indeed. I don't think there are any questions yet, but if anyone does want to pop any, please just use the Q&A feature in the chat. There will be a little icon at the bottom of your Zoom. But yes, so many different aspects explored in this conversation. I suppose, I had my own question around, like Leo mentioned as well, this whole conflict between humans, thinking we're on top of the chain, thinking on top of nature, that disconnect from the natural world. Everyone can sort of sense it's at the root of, the uneasiness that we feel, like the conflict of our times, etc. But in what way does the embodied practice like dance help you reconnect that? Like, even if you're not in connection with nature, how does that help you build that bond again? I mean, I can sense it, like you say, Padma, like, when you're out in nature, you hear that bird, you see that tree, it resonates with you. It's coming from a deeper place of connection. But how does, that practice rekindle that connection?
So yes, Priyanka, this is a good question, isn't it? It's about so the how is really that one has to dance. Yeah, I mean, we can't speak about the dance. Again, Krishnamurti, I mean, he is my favorite philosopher. He said the description is not the thing. Yeah. So that is why, the embodied means one has to dance. And and then people, that's for some people that's scary, but it is about, I'd like, and not all dance is about this, not all dance is about connecting to nature, and that's fine. I mean, again, plurality is a great thing. In the old goddess traditions, everything is fine. It's only the mind that says some things are good, some things are bad. If you go down to the source of the mind, everything is fine because everything is in reality. It's like they say in the Natya Shastra, everything in reality is in dance. And so, but it's about so coming into the practice and finding the dance, finding a dance that is about this, that is actually a technology, because it's not naive. That's a good question you asked, Priyanka, because these are ancient technologies, and they're not naive, they're very sophisticated. There's a whole practice constellation in there, and it's not a romantic thing. It's not just a sentimental fantasy. These were traditions that were in existence for a long time before they lost their powers. And if we are still talking about it, despite all the 1,000 centuries of marginalizing, changing them, here we are still talking about it. So there's an immense power to these traditions, and that another thing they say is that they will be revealed in time. So if it is coming to us now, there is always a timing. So we have to really think completely differently about consciousness, about reality. And there's a beautiful article which Charles Eisenstein, I was reading one of the articles he wrote, where he's talking about, there are these ancient civilizations like Göbekli Tepe, and including some of the caves in India, which are polished. They're polished like mirrors. And then Göbekli Tepe has these huge pillars, and people wonder, how were they made? How did they have the technology? But there is a different way of co-creating with nature. And these traditions come from that intelligence. Is we don't have to do everything. We don't have to figure it out all out. My teacher always used to say, you can't sit here and figure out everything before you go. You know, we don't have to figure it all out. It is unraveled through us in the moment. And if those people built those things, you know, it's not aliens that came to help them, but it's because they had a different way of working with whatever we call nature, deity, goddess, divine. There was a different way in which you could harness and work together. And this is a material reality. Those things are there to show us that it is material, it's not a fantasy. And I think if we want to make it remote again, that's the mind. If we say, you know, it was done by somebody else from somewhere else, that's the mind. Because I know when we move into the body, and I know from working with, you know, the women in my classes, that there is an immense intelligence that awakens, which is completely different from the mind-centered intelligence. So I suppose the answer to your question is, you got to dance.
Actually, it's a very, yes, Leo, go on.
Yeah, additional to that, in my experience working with dancers, there's one dancer that I work with the past years, and she's a wonderful improviser. Padma is also a wonderful improviser. She's also, and when I give her a certain theme for the improvisation, and she starts and she dances, then afterwards she says, when I'm dancing, I know exactly what I'm doing. It's like the language is in my body and I know exactly what I'm doing. When it's finished and we start talking about it, it's a different thing. It's a completely different thing, because these two are not easy to connect. And then I said, that is because when you're dancing, you're in the cave. Basically, you're in the cave. And that kind of realization of you know, how fundamental the embodied sensations can be, that is what comes across, and what is so beautiful about it.
Thanks, Leo. And I think that actually partially answers, but one of the questions that we have on the chat is, there's a comment that your own body can't lie. And, you know, the person who typed that says she resonates with this feeling, but can the panel speak more about this? The fact that the body can't lie.
You know, yes, I've heard that statement as well. And, you know, there's a context for that statement in one sense, because, you know, it does come in, for example, in a therapeutic in a context. There's, you know, there's things, you know, which is where sometimes I have collaborated and worked with trauma specialists in the past. And, you know, part of that is where the body holds certain experiences. And even if, you know, we have tried to tell ourselves we're over it, or we got over it or something, you know, we've moved on, the body holds on, and the body kind of reveals its truth, right? So that is one context. And I mean, when we are here, what I like to sort of think of more in this context, which is like a more philosophical, spiritual context, is something like the truth is in your body. You know, your body holds the truth. And by truth, I mean those kind of philosophical, existential, spiritual truths. And they are things that are revealed. And I know, again, with women, I've worked particularly in the individual program, that when something comes to them, it's very intimate. So we can't go into the program saying, this is what you want to fix. You know, something will come. It may be something about attachment, but it's not in that psychological sense. That's what I'm trying to separate. So it's this, you know, the psychology is one, it's another dimension. We're not talking about that dimension here. So this is more the philosophical, the spiritual dimension, which is, you know, you may come to something. For example, one of the women I was working with, you know, for her, it was that, oh, the attachment is not something about changing things outside of me. It is a shift within me. So nothing changes outside. It's something that is in me that changes. Now, that is an intimate realization, but it is also a universal truth that, again, you don't go outside to change things around you. This consciousness shifting is something that happens within you. And it may or may not have changes outside. It may or may not manifest as, external changes, but we don't start there. So in that sense, the truth about the divine, I mean, if we go right down to it, for me, it is, what is the divine? How do you sense the divine is a sensation. It's not a story, and it's not a text, or it's not somebody telling you what it is, but it is your own sensation. That's the truth in this context. What do you say, Sean or Leo? I don't know if you have anything to.
Well, I think, of course, the concept of lying has something to do with not accepting the reality, or it's a verbal construction that you embark with because somehow the reality that is there is not acceptable. So you change the reality by making a verbal construction. The body can't lie means that there is not a construction like that within the body. I mean, even the unknown means that the reality is in the reality that is there is very much in the moment. And even for the body, it's not a construction that you can accept or not accept, right? So that is what I mean when I say the body can't lie, because there in the moment it is always truthful, and it's truthful also as a because it's being in the known also means that you there's no sense of accepting or not accepting. It is there. It's just there.
Yeah, I love that, Leo. Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Absolutely what you say. The first lie is not accepting reality. Absolutely. Yeah. Sean, I mean, you were going to say something.
I agree. I mean, the body knows its limitations. The mind imagines it can attain things that the body can't, but the body knows when it can't do anything or when it can do something. You know that the body knows it. So in that respect, the body is honest. That's what I would say. Yeah,
And I mean, how wonderful is it in these times, to cherish that, to really facilitate our body and to cherish it in the sense of where there's so much untruth, so much manipulation going on everywhere. Then let's hold our body as a seat and as a temple of truth. Yeah,
absolutely, Leo. And I think this is the thing about that source, not outsourcing truth, and all sides in these times. I mean, I don't belong to any side actually in whatever is going on. I have a healthy skepticism of all sides. Doesn't matter which side, what ideology. I'm healthily skeptical of all sides, and it's just knowing that you don't sign up to something because it's easy, because that's what they've done in the past, and this habits of the mind. In a certain way, we've become very lazy, and we don't feel like we have to put our body in there. We have to kind of bring ourselves there and, investigate, like, really inquire into the truth. And maybe it's not just a one story, to be able to hold complexity. All these things is what dance teaches, is how do you hold, because the minute you say you are inquiring into the unknown with your body, then you also know how to hold ambiguity and complexity, which we are incapable of in our times. I know all of this thing, especially with social media, we have only become more and more and more and more simplistic. And reality is multidimensional. And dance, the whole constellation approach of Shiva's dance, as I say, Shiva's dance, is that life is a constellation, your body is a constellation, your sensations are a constellation. And that means, there's multi-dimension. It's like a star. It's like a constellation in the sky. And that's why, in astrology, each astrological sign in India has a deity, a plant, an animal, and it's because it's multidimensional. It's connected to everything else. And we are not able to do all that anymore. And so we want something very easy, something very quick. And whereas reality may not be about choosing sides. It might be about really staying in this complexity and ambiguity and moving in that, not being paralyzed by it, but being able to move in it. That's the dance of Shiva.
We've got a couple other questions, and I think these relate more to, the actual practice of dance. So, there's a question around how can you support someone to come into their body, especially if it's someone who doesn't sing or dance and, they get anxious at the thought of this form of expression. And another question around the similar lines, right? Like if you don't consider having any formal instruction in dance, to access the body as a philosophy, as opposed to individual free-form improv without any structure, how important is that, to have formal instruction? And also, can you share your thoughts on the role of the witness in dance? That is, what role does the witness play in helping the mover access their own truth or philosophy?
So any dancing is better than no dancing.
I knew this was coming. I felt it coming.
So, any way, don't even, this word dance, it's many a time in my life I have thought, should I use this word? Because it's got this weight. The minute you say dance, it's got this weight. But not all dance is the same. There are many ways of dancing. And so consider that there are many ways of dancing, and don't think about I am going to dance, but sometimes it's just moving, like we just did now. It's just moving. Just allow something to just move. Just smallest movement, and so any movement, anything that you can embody is a good start. And one of the things I do is on my Facebook channels and YouTube channels, I do post weekly practices. They're very simple practices. So that may be, if you haven't done anything, it may be a good place to start. And they're very simple things every week. And I just, there's a little philosophy and a practice. So that is something that you can try if you feel so called. And the dancing that, like, Priyanka, you could speak to that too. The dancing that we do, for example, it's not really about mastery, or, I don't like words like mastery and competence because they're very much kind of mental frameworks. It is a very different approach, and it's difficult to speak about it, but it isn't about coming and learning and mastering and getting better and progressing, but it's a very different way, because that is what we do when dance is a practice about consciousness, and it's a practice about returning to body and embodying that consciousness. It's a very different thing to dance as performance. We don't actually perform. Yeah, we don't, none in my classes. So there is a very different way. You have to be purposeful that this is what you want to do with the dance, and then you teach it in that particular. It's not the same as teaching it for any other purpose. This is a particular way of teaching. And the role of the witness, it's really interesting, because when I work individually with women, I accompany them. So I'm accompanying them, and I can tell you this accompaniment is very material, so that sometimes I can have, the same dreams as this person I'm practicing with. So a woman might be with me invoking a particular deity, and and sometimes let me share one story with you just to show you how material it is. One woman I was practicing with, she has allergies. I don't have any allergies, and we are online. You know, she's in a different state. I'm here, and we're online. And you know, just before her session one day, I was having this allergic reaction, and I just didn't know what was going on. I thought there's nothing different in my studio. Anyway, you know, I tried to do something, and then she came on, and she had this very bad allergic attack that day. And so it's very material, that connection. It's so that you are not alone in the cave. Somebody's accompanying you. So I would call it more an accompanying than a witnessing, because I'm not passive, you know, and certainly when I teach as well, you know, as a group, we are all doing this together. We accompany each other. So, you know, I don't know, Priyanka, I don't know whether you have anything to add because you've been in the classes.
Yes, and I think, you know, in a lot of instances where, you know, there have been something like, you know, the music isn't working, or, you know, it's just us doing the steps. A lot of time, you know, it's because it isn't choreographed, it's almost, you know, the beat, and you're getting into the rhythm, and the rhythm's coming from your body. And, you know, a lot of times we find that, you know, even without the music, we get the beat and the dance, and, you know, you get into that rasa. So it's almost, you know, it doesn't matter if you're in a room together and dancing or not. Once you're in that, you know, in that embodied flow, and you've just retreated to your senses, and which is one of the things we're doing right now with the Shiva practice, where you take those streams of consciousness and you're pulling them towards you. Just that retreating into the cave is almost the dance begins. And
Yeah.
it's very powerful, and it's very hard to describe, because, you know, I think everyone feels that connection of, you know, disconnecting from the mind and just coming completely into the body, like into that, you know, the karana, the lower chakras. It's just, you just feel it. It's a sensation.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just think it's so important, the assumption you just have to do it. You know,
Yes.
I mean, embark with it, do it, and we all have to get loose. I mean, in arts, of course, there's this long development that art became a profession. You know, so also dancer became a profession, and now we think of dance like as something virtuosic, as virtuosic bodies, you know, being on stage, doing things that we feel, oh, that's impossible for me. But that you know, that virtuosic body is not what dance is when we speak about dance. You know, when we speak about dance, it's like anybody that, you know, is having embodied sensation because of movement. So let's go of that virtuosic because that's a kind of idealistic thing that even generates a certain fear, like, oh, the dancers were so wonderful, like whether they are like you know, bodies from heaven. But we have our own body, and
And I think we touched, you know, there was that, I don't know if it was you, Leo, who mentioned that there was this study where even just looking at someone dance, you know, it has a neurological impact on you. Like, you know, it stimulates your mind, your body. Just the act of watching dance can be pretty therapeutic.
Yeah, I find that amazing that you know, watching dance is healthy. Isn't that wonderful? It's yeah.
Sean, do you have any observations? Because, you know, you also have done the dance, and you come from a very, again, another different sort of context.
I guess one of the challenges that I've always had with the classes, with the dance, is surrendering the body to that space, because the mind wants to know the next step, wants to judge the previous step, wants to be critical and correct what was done before and not repeat it. And I guess coming from having had a training in a mind dominated tradition for all my life, I could say, it's not easy to surrender the body to that space. And again, one of the things that I try to understand is this whole issue of time. Because I think if today's society has become a slave to anything, it's a slave to time. We agonize about what we want to do in the future, and we punish ourselves for what we did in the past. And the mind has wonderful tools that equip us in this entire process. So, and that has been a huge challenge for me, because like I said, I would be very critical about what I did and what I am going to do. But while we were talking, and I'm mindful of the time again, we use these two terms, embodied intelligence and embodied intuition. So that means that the body, that intuition and intelligence are embodied within the body. Is it correct to, this is a question I want to ask, is it correct to assume, therefore, that we are living in the very opposite of that, in an intelligent embodiment or an intuitive embodiment? Sort of the body is existing within the mind. And is that a correct term that we could use for this? I don't know, I'm putting it out there to all of you.
And just to add to Sean's question, there's another one on the chat, which is on similar lines, actually. What is the relationship between dance and music? Like, to understand that, the vibrations that come from the body or is the whole of existence as a vibration?
So I'll just touch on both. And I think Leo may have some, because Leo's the one who was talking about intuition. And, I think for me, intuition always is embodied, but it has to be a body that is free of the shackles of the mind, not a body that we never speak of destroying the mind. So please, this is where I want to be very careful and say, it is not about destroying the mind. There's no brutality here, because remember that Shiva is making love to the goddess. The goddess is holding the mind lovingly. So, but the intuition is always embodied, and from that union, the mind acts. The mind can manifest in a much more whole way. The mind is beautiful. It's very powerful and beautiful. So it's important to say that, because we're not really talking about, there's no good and bad here. We're just talking about something bigger than what we could, where we are right now. And so I would say that, yes, the body is very much conquered by the mind at the moment. But then we die. So in the end, the body wins. we think we are immortal. We live as if we are immortal.
Yeah.
We live as if we are immortal. Yeah. So there is this, perhaps that's a delusion that we control the body. But I think at the moment we think we control the body. But I think there are, as I'm saying it, I'm realizing, well, the body gets sick, the body does things, the body ages, and the body dies. No matter what we do, all these things are going to happen. So in a certain way, there is a reality of the body that we are completely, like Leo said, we have to lie in order for us to think that we've conquered the body, just like we think we've conquered nature. So maybe I just correct myself as I talked. I realized I correct myself. And in relation to the music, in the Natya Shastra, it says the dance doesn't require any text or music. From dance comes everything. Because dance is the first movement of the body, and our body has music. Our body has rhythm. And everything came from the body. Sound, music, rhythm came from the body. So when you return to the body, the music will come from the body. In our classes, in fact, this comes from the Natya Shastra, where I ask people to just make sounds as you're doing. And that is there in the Natya Shastra as a practice. So again, otherwise what will happen is we'll start illustrating music, which is fine. There are dances that do that, and that's fine. But in this practice, we're not simply illustrating music or rhythm. We're leading with the body. So over to you, Leo, if you had something.
Well, in terms of the aspect of intuition and relating that to a creative process, there's this famous image of the sculptor Rodin was the big block of marble. It's a very known image that he says, you know, the statue is already in the marble. It's in the block. I'm the one who is uncovering it. And in terms of the creative process, often when I start working, it is very important, like, you know, to lose the control, because the artist control would like to say, okay, we have to do this and that and that and that and that, and then in the end we'll have a performance. No, start at a certain point, and then I'm strongly believer in that, you know, the creative process, or let's say the performance that will be there in the end tells you what needs to be done. So you in fact you take one step, and then you're being told what will be the next step and the next step and the next step. So in fact, the creative process is a process of revelation. You know, you as a maker are being revealed what is necessary to do in order to get the creation done. So this you know, daring and being courageous in letting the intuition plays its role. So in every aspect of that, you know, also in, you know, embarking into the unknown, there's a certain courage necessary, and to do it, and also to you know, to be courageous to leave the control out, you know, leave the control out. And so intuition, human intuition, is such a strong factor in navigating yourself through life, even, but also you know, to every moment in your life. Intuition can be a strong navigator.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, Priyanka, we might bring it to an end, but before you close, I just wanted to say thank you to Leo and Sean for making time to. It's such a privilege, truly. It's such a privilege to have you both, and thank you so much, Priyanka, for always being there so that I don't have to be nervous. I know you're there.
My pleasure.
I'm completely happy with Priyanka because she's so calm with the technical stuff.
So I want to say thank you to all of you. I want to say thank you to those who joined us, whether you are watching this live or whether you'll watch the recording. Whatever way you've engaged with us, I'm so honored and I'm so thankful that you are here helping us kind of sow the seeds and, you know, bring this consciousness and practice and you know, bring it to more people. Thank you. I just want to say that if you're interested in my offerings, I do, as I said, I do an individual program, which is 6 months, one-on-one. And I also do group programs, which are available, and intensives. And then I have weekly practices, which I offer through my Facebook and YouTube channels. You can also sign up for my newsletter. And you will find all this information on my website, which is movingarchetypes.com.au, movingarchetypes.com.au. Thank you so much again, all of you, and I'll hand over to Priyanka.
Thank you all very much. Thanks, Padma, Sean, and Leo. As always, insightful, absorbing discussion. I don't know where the last hour and a half have gone. And thank you all for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you. Of course, thank you, Padma, as my longtime collaborator. It was so wonderful, as always, you know, to have this conversation dialogue with you, and Sean. Thank you so much. I mean, so helpful how you navigate us to this dialogue. As I said, Padma and myself have tendency to be a bit extremist, and so, it's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity and this privilege. Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. And please don't forget to just get in touch with Padma for any of you, if you have any questions that we weren't able to get to, or for, join the dance, join the movement. So you can see Padma's contact details there on your screen, info@movingarchetypes.com.au, and the website is www.movingarchetypes.com.au. So with that, I wish you all a good evening. Enjoy your weekend.